But what I want to tell you today is what I'm doing with my company, how I got to where I am, what that really means, and a couple of things that I've learned from it. So why tell this story? What's important about this? So the me of 2 or 3 years ago, wanting to turn my career away from web development and towards audio software development, struggled to find kind of valuable, concrete details about what it's like to make plugins and try to sell them by yourself. And I think the me of today can finally answer some of the questions a little bit. So this picture here is a thread that I wrote on the Juice forum almost 2 years ago now, just after like failing to find some answers that I was looking for, just reaching out and seeing if anybody wanted to share. And I think that we're really good in this community at sharing technical knowledge. I think we're awesome. It's actually amazing. But I think there are also a lot of people who are new and just getting started and want to hear a little bit more about the other side of our experiences. How much does a plugin really earn? How much does it cost? Are my numbers low, or is this to be expected? Is marketing in this channel worth the investment? This forum post even, this one showed up I think like 5 days ago. And there's a lot of posts like this. I think there are people who want to hear, I think, just maybe not things that are specifically technical, but some of the other side of what we do. So let me start with a story. I was always one of those kids that was probably a little too obsessed with his computer growing up. I taught myself how to program by the time I was 12 or something. I taught myself electronic music when I found Fruity Loops 3 around the same time, and those two details went on to become really strong themes in my life. When I graduated university, I took a really exciting job offer doing front-end web development at Facebook and immediately moved out to San Francisco. Not long thereafter, I started to realize that my heart just wasn't really in web programming. I was good at it, it paid well, but I was kind of just waiting to get home to work on my hobby projects. I stumbled onto Juice sometime in 2015, at which point my hobby projects really started to explore this kind of music technology boundary, merging those two strong themes from earlier in my life. I continued my web career nonetheless and gradually became a person, I think, who would kind of just clock in and clock out at his day job and then rush home to dive back into my plugin projects or into my DSP textbooks or even just get on the Juice forum. I mean, on the Juice forum, every day people are sharing practical, useful knowledge. Like, there's always something to read. So before long, I was wondering what a career in audio would look like. But my resume just wasn't strong. Like, I don't think I had anything on my resume to convince audio companies that I'm useful in the audio domain. I tried applying, and I got I think most of the applications I sent were ignored, but I did get a few interview offers for web developer positions. And at the same time, I had a plugin that I had finished that I was really proud of. I thought I knew what it took to make a plugin, and I wanted this change in my career. So selling my plugin seemed like an obvious idea. So I started looking for info about what it's really like to sell a plugin, and I couldn't really find answers to the questions I was looking for. But I had my heart set. So still full-time employed in web development, I finished the product I was working on. I started a company, and I launched my first plugin, Temper, in July of 2017. 6 months later, I had a second product almost ready to go. And I was really committed to kind of taking my shot at making this a viable career path. So I set aside a little of my savings. I invested all my time in my company, and I took a gamble. 20 sales a month should about cover rent, right? How hard can this be? It's pretty hard. So here we are almost 1 full year later, and I want to share with you where I really am. And so let me clarify that last piece of my timeline there. Earlier this year, I set out to make a sustainable living selling my products, or at least to prove to myself that sustainable living was possible and within reach. This is not fancy cars and champagne. This is paying rent and putting food on the table, selling my plugins by myself. So I want to be totally honest with you for a minute and share some of the details that I found myself asking for a couple years ago. Okay, so in February, I re-released my first product for free, just to try to get my brand on the map. In the months that followed, my mailing list kind of blew up. I got like 1,500 subscribers in February and another 1,100 in March. And so right off the bat, it felt like the indicators were really strong that my next product release would maybe be able to deliver on my original goal. I released Tantrum in April with all of this excitement, I mean, personal excitement. You know, here I had this new distortion algorithm that I hadn't really heard before, and it sounded different, and I was excited to use it in my own music. And in the 6 months that followed, I sold 269 copies, and I gave 7,400 downloads of Temper. So this chart shows my net revenue from plugin sales in the 6 months that followed the announcement. And I want to break down where these numbers come from. So this chart is in US dollars. That topmost line there is 3,000 US dollars. And I want to point out that this chart does not include paying myself. So there is no living expenses or anything like this in the net calculation. Okay, so my opening month was about $700 or $800 in revenue, and that was almost exclusively driven by my KVR announcement. For me, I think trying to facilitate a positive conversation around my product on KVR brought a ton of eyes to my website. Conversely, my newsletter plan was a total flop. I mean, here I thought, hey, 2,500 new subscribers, I'll be able to send out this big, email blast, and I'll get a big conversion, like a nice chunk of money up front. And man, that was just so not true. I converted one direct sale on that newsletter blast, and I think I maybe a couple extra indirectly. So May and June were pretty good months, and June was by far my best month. So June, my net revenue was around $2,400, and the big deal in those months was promotional discounts. So I ran an article with a small media outlet. I had a coupon at the bottom, exclusive for the readers of that outlet, and a limited run, and that worked really, really well. And getting an artist on board. So I made my own videos and my own social media campaigns trying to promote my product, and nothing came of it really initially. But I got one influencer who made one video, and it gave me my strongest spike of sales ever. And I did the same thing. I ran a promotional discount with him for his followers. I want to say quickly that it's really easy to go and say, just get somebody to make a YouTube video of your product, you'll be fine. But it's actually not that easy. Most of my conversations were kind of dead ends. And it took a while for me to realize that, like, if you're starting these conversations, it took a while for me to understand that there needed to be a mutual benefit for this to be an effective conversation. Okay, so in May, I also tried to run a promotional giveaway via my own social media profiles, and it was embarrassingly bad. I didn't quite understand how little reach I had on social media, and I tried this, and then I understood, and I'm not good at social media. Okay, so maybe you're wondering, what was the deal in July and September? So these were the months where I didn't actively line something up. I have this kind of suspicion that once your brand gets big enough, your products will circulate on the internet a little bit without your continued investment. But before this critical mass point, my experience has been that not actively investing in my marketing means that I just make sales. And then there's August with another spike, and that was a summer sale that I ran 50% off for 2 weeks, promoted through KVR and social media. Okay, so one thing to note here is that this graph is highly variable. My experience has been that revenue pretty much only comes during sales events. And so if I average the net revenue over these 6 months, the average comes out to about $1,000 US dollars per month. But then if I adjust for taxes, which are shown in red here, that average becomes closer to $700 a month. And if I include October, wherein my revenue was similar to September for similar reasons, that number gets closer to $600 a month. And so I want to stop right here just to say that by some measures, this is an awesome success, right? And speaking honestly, I'm personally really happy and really grateful and really proud of these numbers so far. But at the same time, when you're lucky to pay rent, pay less than $1,000 a month for an apartment in Boston, which is shown in the yellow line, this isn't cutting it, right? Not cutting rent, and it's not covering food on the table. And so with the extreme variance month to month, also, I'm not totally confident that I can take this as proof that a sustainable income is within reach here. I feel like I need a lot more data. Let me take a step back and put this in context, though. It only takes a few minutes on the internet to look up some generic statistics about small businesses in the United States. For example, only 50% of the small businesses started in 2011 were still standing in 2016. And only 30% of businesses only 30% of businesses on average go on to survive 10 years. In a 2016 report, only 40% of small businesses in the United States were reporting profit, and 30% they were just constantly losing money. And from my research, it seems like a lot of these businesses weren't even factoring in paying themselves before reporting these kind of numbers. So, initially, maybe my own numbers are kind of just par for the course, right? Like maybe I was naive just in thinking I could take any small business from zero to paying rent in the first year. But I want to be really careful about comparing my experience to generic small business statistics as well, because we face a very distinguishing set of challenges in this field. So first, to create a successful product, or to create any product, you have to be skilled both technically and creatively. You have to be reasonably proficient in signal processing, software engineering, interface design, and you have to put that together in a package that motivates people musically, right? Beyond that, once you get your product to market, you have a really big challenge making that visible to potential customers. I think that's both because we have a small and highly saturated market. And at least in the world of desktop plugins, we don't really have an app store or a Steam or anything to kind of help your product visibility. So your challenge also includes setting up a storefront, taking payments, and making all of this visible to your potential customers. So I think what I'm saying actually is that you have to be proficient in signal processing, interface design, software engineering, digital marketing, and make something that inspires people. It's a lot. The most comparable small business that I've studied is independent game development. And here I think they have a similar problem with market saturation. But even in independent game development, they have tools like Unity, right, which can abstract away a lot of like the underlying physics or the underlying software development. And we don't quite have a Unity for audio plugins. So when I try to put my story in context, I think the only thing that's super clear to me is that my experiences alone can't really paint a comprehensive picture. And that it's really hard to gain insight into the audio plugin niche by looking at other niches. So to that end, I want to share with you a survey that I took of other independent plugin developers. I ran this survey called the Independent Audio Plugin Developer Report and posted around the Juice Forum and KVR and social media. Maybe you saw it there. And if you filled it out, thank you so much. The data is already online on my website. You can find it there after the talk. But first, I want to drill down into some generic stats that I gathered from the survey. This chart shows the length of time that the companies surveyed have been operating. And 38% of these companies have been around for less than 2 years. This chart shows the budget allocated for each of the developer's current project. 77% of the people have little or no budget here. And I think that breaks down with 35% of the people who reported doing this just in their free time, and about 40% of the people who answered the $0 to $20 budget bracket. And I like to put $25,000 into perspective just from my own head. Based on my own numbers and based on living in Boston, I think $25,000 could maybe and my business expenses living 1 full year pretty frugally, right? This chart shows the size of the companies surveyed. Almost 70% of the people who answered the survey are operating as a solo developer. And if we zoom into the companies who've been operating less than a year on the previous 2 charts, 100% of the people who answered are operating by themselves. 50% of them are doing it in their free time, and the other 50% have pretty much no budget. And where they do, it's exclusively self-funded or funded by freelance. So this fills in the picture a little bit, right? Nobody's making meaningful income in their first year. So then what does it take to get some real revenue? So I tried to pick out a group of the most successful companies, and here I'll refer to those as the top-ranked companies. And I'm defining success considering the companies who are able to allocate a pretty big budget to their current project and then fund that budget almost entirely on revenue from past products, and then where available based on explicit 2017 revenue that was shared. Okay, this chart shows top-ranked companies have been in business. And this red segment here is 10 or more years, and clearly that is dominating. And if you include the 4+ year bracket, that's 90% of these companies. Here we're looking at the number of people in each of these top-ranked companies. This is 70% or more of these companies have 3 or more people involved. And actually, interesting is in this group who is operating by themselves. This last chart shows how many additional products each of these top-ranked companies are maintaining in addition to their ongoing project. Nobody here has fewer than 2 products, and 70% of people have 5 or more products. And actually, 40% of people have 10 or more products. Okay, so what can we take away from this, right? What can we take away from these top-ranked companies, and how do they compare to generic stats and to the new companies? In my head, one of the most succinct ways to form this comparison and to try to digest these results is this. None of these successful companies are something that one person built over the course of a year or 2. These are companies that have been building themselves for years. So what can we take away from all this? Well, I can tell you at least 3 things that I would go back and tell myself 3 years ago. So come back in time with me for a minute. If I could find any lesson in the little bit of in this developer survey, I would say, dear Nick, don't go into this with financial expectations. Don't fall for the if you build it, they will come idea, and don't underestimate the value of building a reputation over time. If I could find any lesson in the numbers we saw in the past 6 months of Creative Intent's story, I'd say, dear Nick, build a few more products before you try setting expectations for yourself. And do it for the love of it, and through that, share your passion and your story and your personality through your products, and just trust that the returns will come over time. And if I could find any lesson in the story that brought me today, I would say, dear Nick, share. Share your successes and share your struggles. You're not the only one asking these kinds of questions. And Nick, invest in your communities. If I think all the way back to 2015, there's one thing that strikes me super clearly. I would never even have tried if I hadn't found Juice. And I think that's a powerful realization. There are people who wouldn't be here today if not for communities like AudioKit, or like Juice and the Juice Forum, or like the Audio Programmer community. And I'm one of those people. And these tools and the people that surround these tools are unbelievably empowering. And I personally can't really express just how much appreciation I share for that one little detail. So Nick of 3 years ago, give back to that and keep an eye out for the next person on the Juice forums to ask for advice. I want to give thanks to a long list of people who really helped me with all these thoughts and putting this talk together. And thank you guys all for being here and for listening.
So I, like you, we were talking before. So yeah, like you, we've been out for a year, and yeah, like as you say, like it's always difficult starting a new business, but I would like to add that it's also very exciting and very cool. Like money is not everything in life, one of the things, and building your own products, having people comment on them saying they're the best thing that they've ever done, or someone saying that they use your plugin to create this great musical piece is also very exciting. So yeah, that's just a comment.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I could also say that this year has been like the most fun year that I've had working professionally ever, right? But one thing that I encountered when I was preparing all this is that I think in general, maybe just as humans, we're we're really quick and we're really confident in sharing our success stories. And we're also really quick at kind of like sweeping under the rug when we maybe didn't do so well. And so I think I could have gotten up and given a talk that was, hey, I had so much fun, you should all make plugins. But that wouldn't have answered any of the questions that me 3 years ago was.
I liked your talk a lot.
Yeah.
Hey, Nick. Thanks for the great talk. And I was wondering if you could just expand a little bit on the part where you're saying about sharing and building communities as a plugin developer. What does that exactly mean for you?
Yeah, I mean, it means a lot of things, and I'm sort of trying to figure out how I can give back more myself. But being super active on the forums, and especially in, for example, in your audio program or chat room, people come in all the time with really simple questions, right? And for me, sometimes these questions, it's easy for me to be like, oh, I got so much to do. I can't chat about this right now. But 5 minutes right there could be the difference between, like, you know, Nick 3 years ago finding juice or something, or like understanding how to make a plugin or something. I think a little bit goes a long way. So I personally want to put more into the community.
Well, thanks for sharing your experience. I just wanted to ask, when in the months that you showed, 6 months, what was your time spent doing? How much did you spend coding? How much was spent reaching out to people to try and advertise and build relationships? And also a kind of second question. I'm really sorry I missed the first few minutes, but are you a web developer by trade previously?
Yeah.
So you probably already had a massive head start in being able to develop the website of your things, and that's a lot of people wouldn't come with those skills.
Yeah. So, I mean, just even in hearing the question, like, there are so many hats that you have to try to do this. And going back to the graph, the first 3 months, so it was April, May, and June, these were the months where I had finished developing. Oh. Better? Okay, so finished the second product in April. I launched at the beginning of April. April, May, and June, I was pretty much 100% on customer support, marketing, website, promotional stuff. And then some of the advice that I've been receiving from other successful companies was, like, you have to get your next product out. So after June, I started putting more time into developing another product. And that's, I think, a big part of what you saw in it was July and September in that graph, just totally almost no revenue. So I think that's about the split. Like, the first 3 months, really hard on marketing, really hard on sales, no development time. And then the latter 3 months, a lot of dev time, much less marketing. Time? I think that's it. Thank you, guys.